The sun rose like molten fire over the Nevada desert, burning through the morning haze that hung above the military base. The tarmac shimmered with heat, mirages dancing in the distance as the wind carried the hum of rotors, the metallic clang of tools, and the distant bark of orders. Amid the motion and noise, Sergeant Emily Carter worked in silence, sleeves rolled down, gloves tight around her wrists, every movement precise and deliberate. She had been assigned to the 160th Aviation Regiment, known for their stealth and speed. The Black Hawk helicopters here weren't just machines, they were lifelines for soldiers in combat zones across the world. And Emily treated them as such, with reverence and caution, as if each bolt and wire carried a heartbeat. She had been there for 2 years, always first to arrive, last to leave, and never once late for duty. Most people didn't know where she came from. Some said she transferred from another base after a classified mission went wrong. Others whispered she had once been Special Forces, but got demoted after something bad. But no one ever asked directly. Emily had the kind of eyes that told you not to dig too deep, steady, calm, but shadowed by something cold and distant. She worked alone most days, except when a mission was close. That morning, the orders were clear. Prepare the Black Hawk for Colonel James Walker, the base commander himself. It wasn't a routine transport. He was heading to inspect a training site 200 miles east, and the flight had to be flawless. Everyone on the hangar floor felt the pressure. When the commander flew, every mechanic became twice as careful, every soldier twice as alert. Emily didn't flinch. While others scurried to check systems and recheck paperwork, she focused on the helicopter, her helicopter. Its matte black skin absorbed the sunlight, the kind of aircraft that looked like a predator even when resting. She ran her fingers along the body, checking for heat cracks, wear, or loose rivets. Every motion was methodical, worn from years of habit. "Carter," came a voice behind her. She turned. It was Staff Sergeant Mason, her supervisor, a broad-shouldered man who had seen many tours and had learned to stop asking questions about anything marked classified. "You're arming for the colonel's inspection flight?" he asked, squinting. "Yes, sir," Emily replied, not looking up. He nodded, chewing on gum, eyes roaming over her work. "You always wear those sleeves, even in this heat?" Emily paused, just for a second. "Regulation long sleeves, sir. Safety." Mason grunted. "Right, safety." He didn't push it further. He'd noticed it before, of course. Everyone had. Emily never took off her gloves or rolled up her sleeves, no matter how hot the desert burned. Some thought she was hiding scars. Others thought she just wanted to stay invisible. Either way, no one had ever seen her skin above her wrists. As Mason walked off, Emily exhaled slowly and flexed her fingers. Beneath the gloves, beneath the fabric, was the truth she could never afford to show. By noon, the hangar doors rolled open, and the roar of engines filled the air. Colonel James Walker arrived in a convoy of Humvees, the kind of entrance that made every soldier straighten instinctively. He was tall, silver-haired, with a jaw cut from discipline itself. His uniform was immaculate, his boots shined like mirrors, and his eyes sharp, calculating, missed nothing. Emily watched him from a distance as he approached the aircraft. She'd never spoken to him before, but everyone knew his reputation. Walker was a veteran pilot, a man who'd led dozens of missions overseas, rumored to have survived crashes that should have been fatal. Some called him the Hawk because he could spot a mistake before it happened. Others said he was cold, uncheckable, the kind of commander who lived by the book and never forgave carelessness. As he neared the helicopter, Emily felt that familiar tightening in her chest. It wasn't fear. It was the instinct of someone who'd spent years hiding, someone who had built an invisible wall around herself and knew exactly how fragile it could be. "Sergeant," Walker said, his tone clipped and precise. "You're responsible for this aircraft?" "Yes, sir," Emily replied, her voice steady. He circled the helicopter slowly, eyes trailing over the rotors, the fuselage, the mounted M240 machine gun. "How long have you been with this unit?" "2 years, sir." Walker's gaze lingered on her face for a moment, searching, assessing, as if her answer carried more weight than the words implied. Then he nodded toward the fuel gauge. "Good. I don't like surprises in the air." "Neither do I, sir," she said. For a split second, their eyes met hers, calm but guarded, his inquisitive, faintly haunted. Then she returned to her work, double-checking the ammunition belt, tightening the clamps. The metal was scorching to the touch, even through her gloves, but she didn't flinch. Walker continued his inspection, his footsteps echoing across the hangar floor. Everything seemed routine until he stopped beside her, watching closely as she reached upward to secure the wing-mounted sensor pod. Her sleeve slid up just an inch. It happened fast. The edge of her glove shifted, and sunlight caught the faint curve of a dark ink line on her wrist. Walker's body stiffened. His breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world around him blurred. The heat, the noise, the metallic scent of oil and dust. He saw it clearly. A tattoo. Not just any tattoo. A winged dagger, curling into a string of numbers, barely visible, but burned into his memory like a scar. For the briefest second, Emily froze too. She felt his stare on her skin like a laser, then quickly pulled her sleeve back down. Her heart thudded once hard, before returning to its rhythm. She didn't look at him, didn't breathe wrong, just continued tightening the bolt as if nothing had happened. But Walker couldn't move. He knew that symbol. He had seen it before on the arm of a soldier long dead. "Is there a problem, sir?" Emily asked quietly, still focused on the helicopter. Walker blinked, snapping back into the present. "No," he said too quickly. "No problem." He turned away, masking his confusion with a professional nod. But his heart pounded with something he hadn't felt in years' recognition. The last time he had seen that tattoo was 12 years ago, in the mountains of Afghanistan, during a mission that went catastrophically wrong. A mission that killed nearly his entire unit. And one of them, one young medic named Lena Carter, had vanished without a trace. That night, after the inspection, Walker sat in his dimly lit office, staring at the incident reports from that mission. The memories came rushing back: the burning convoy, the gunfire, the explosion that swallowed half the squad. He remembered Lena's voice over the radio, her calm even as chaos raged around them. Then silence. Her body was never found. And now, a mechanic with the same eyes, the same sharp calm, and that same mark on her wrist, was standing in his hangar, calling herself Emily Carter. Coincidence? Impossible. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he replayed the moment over and over in his mind. The flash of ink, the startled stillness in her posture, the way she avoided his gaze after. He didn't know who she really was. But one thing was certain. She wasn't just arming the Black Hawk. She was carrying a secret one that had somehow survived a dozen years of silence, buried under lies and dust. And by the time the sun rose again, Colonel James Walker knew he would find out the truth. Even if it meant unearthing ghosts the Army had long tried to forget. The next morning arrived with the crisp hum of engines and the distant thud of rotor blades cutting the desert air. Inside Hangar 6, Sergeant Emily Carter was already at work. The smell of fuel and oil hung thick, mixing with the dry Nevada dust. Mechanics moved in rhythm, their movements timed like soldiers on parade. Emily preferred it this way. Machines didn't ask questions, and engines didn't judge. But today, her routine wasn't the same. Every sound felt sharper, every stare heavier. Somewhere in the back of her mind, She could feel the weight of Colonel Walker's gaze, even when he wasn't there. She hadn't meant to let him see it, a tattoo that marked her past, that tied her to a life she had buried in a desert half a world away. She had spent 12 years hiding it, 12 years becoming someone else. And all it took was one careless moment under the sunlight. Still, she told herself it didn't matter. He'd forget. He had to. By 0800 hours, the hangar floor was cleared for a pre-flight inspection. The Black Hawk gleamed under the overhead lights, its black surface spotless, its systems armed and calibrated. Emily moved along the fuselage, checking the M240 mounts and the electronic countermeasure pods. Her hands were steady, but her mind wasn't. Every few seconds, she caught herself glancing at the hangar doors, half expecting the colonel to appear again. And he did. Colonel James Walker entered without a word, boots echoing against the hangar's concrete floor. The chatter among the crew hushed instantly. His presence had that effect like gravity itself shifting. He was dressed in a flight suit, helmet under one arm, expression calm and unreadable. Emily straightened and saluted. "Sir?" "At ease," Walker said, voice firm but quiet. He stepped closer, eyes scanning the helicopter with the careful attention of a man inspecting more than just metal. Emily pretended not to notice. Walker began his inspection the same way he always did, systematically, methodically. He ran his hand along the fuselage, checked the mountings, tapped on the panels to listen for hollow sounds. He said nothing, but every movement was deliberate. The silence between them wasn't just professional, it was charged. When he finally spoke, his tone was even. "You've done solid work, Sergeant. Thank you, sir. Your record shows consistent maintenance ratings. 0 mechanical errors in over 2 years. That's rare. I just do my job, sir." He looked at her. "You do more than that." Emily froze for half a second, unsure how to respond. She could feel his eyes searching hers, not as a commander observing a subordinate, but as a man trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't yet understand. "You ever serve overseas?" he asked casually. Her heart skipped. "No, sir. Stationed stateside since I enlisted." He nodded slowly, as though he didn't quite believe her. "Funny," he murmured, walking past her. "You move like someone who's been in the field." She said nothing. Walker crouched to inspect the landing gear, running a hand over the tire tread. Then he stood, facing her again. "We'll take her up tomorrow." "Field evaluation flight." "Yes, sir," she replied. As he turned to leave, his eyes flickered once more toward her covered wrist. Her sleeve was tight, secure, but he wasn't looking at the fabric. He was remembering the ink beneath it. That night, in his quarters, Walker sat at his desk, surrounded by old files. He had pulled them from the classified archives. A risky move, but he had clearance high enough to get what he wanted. The folder was thin, yellowed, stamped, declassified, partial access. The title read, Operation Viper Talon. He flipped through the pages, the words blurring under his eyes as old memories clawed their way back to life. Task Force Viper, Covert Extraction Mission. Region, Ordic Province, Afghanistan. Objective, recover captured U.S. operatives from insurgent stronghold. Casualties, 17 confirmed dead. 3 missing in action. Operation terminated due to loss of communication and tactical failure. He swallowed hard and turned another page. A photo was clipped to it, grainy, black and white. The faces of the task force members stared back at him, young and fearless. He recognized each one. Reynolds, Torres, Miller. And then her. Lena Carter. Combat medic. Age 22. She was smiling in the photo, her hair tied back, her uniform dusty, a faint tattoo visible on her wrist, a winged dagger with a string of numbers. His pulse quickened. He flipped through the reports until he found the one that had haunted him for years. The incident summary. Last transmission received. We're surrounded. Taking heavy fire. Medevac impossible. Body of CPL. Lena Carter never recovered. Presumed KIA. Walker leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the name. Carter. He whispered it to himself, tasting the word like something both familiar and forbidden. If Emily Carter was who he thought she was, if she was Lena, then she had survived a mission the Army buried. But how? And why hide her identity? He rubbed a hand across his face. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe it was coincidence, a common last name, a random tattoo. But deep down, he knew better. Soldiers who had fought together, bled together, they carried something in their eyes that time couldn't erase. And Emily had that same look. The next day dawned cold, unusual for Nevada. The air was thick with dust as dawn light spilled over the horizon. Emily arrived at the hangar before sunrise, going through her checklist again and again to distract herself from her thoughts. She hadn't slept much. The colonel's stare had followed her through the night. She knew that look, curiosity mixed with memory. It was the same expression commanders wore before asking questions you couldn't afford to answer. As she tightened the last fuel cap, Mason approached her, yawning. "He's taking her up today, huh?" Emily nodded. "Yes, sir." "Lucky you, Carter. Not every day the boss picks your bird." "Guess he trusts my work," she said simply. "Or he's checking it," Mason replied with a smirk before walking off. She ignored him. She had bigger problems. At exactly 0600, Walker arrived in full flight gear. He approached her quietly, his voice steady. "Pre-flight status?" "All systems operational, sir. Weapon mounts secure, fuel tanks full, rotors calibrated." He nodded. "I'll be flying with Captain Hayes. You'll assist in the hangar for now." "Yes, sir." He climbed into the cockpit, fastening his harness. Emily stood nearby, watching as the rotors began to spin. The roar filled the air, whipping dust into spirals. Walker's eyes caught hers through the cockpit glass steady, searching, unspoken words passing between them. The Black Hawk lifted, the sound thunderous, the ground trembling beneath her boots. Emily shielded her face from the swirling sand, watching the helicopter rise into the glowing morning sky. As it disappeared beyond the dunes, she exhaled slowly, relief mingled with unease. She knew what that look had meant. He remembered something. He knew something. Inside the cockpit, Walker's hands gripped the controls. Hayes, his co-pilot, glanced over. "You good, sir?" Walker didn't answer right away. His mind wasn't on the flight. It was 12 years in the past, in that Afghan valley where smoke and fire swallowed his men, where a young medic with a winged dagger tattoo had vanished into dust. He thought of her final radio call, her voice steady even in chaos. "We're not going to make it, sir. But I'm staying with them." And now, sitting in this same helicopter model, hearing the same whine of rotors, he couldn't help but wonder, what if she had made it? What if she had lived all this time, hiding under another name, another life, right under his command? He looked down through the glass at the hangar below, where Emily Carter stood watching them disappear into the sky. Something deep in his gut whispered the truth he didn't want to believe. That woman wasn't just a mechanic. She was a ghost from a mission he could never forget, and her return meant the past he buried was coming back for him. Colonel James Walker stood on the tarmac long after the Black Hawk had landed, his helmet still under his arm, the rotors slowing behind him. The world around him was moving, the crew rushing to refuel, the pilots debriefing, but his mind was trapped 12 years in the past. The sight of that tattoo had stirred ghosts he thought he had buried forever. That winged dagger, its blade cutting through a serpent, with numbers curved beneath. It wasn't some random design. It belonged to Task Force Viper, a secret unit that operated in Afghanistan under direct orders from the Pentagon. They had been invisible until the day they were ambushed in the Wardak province and wiped from existence. Walker had led that mission. He could still smell the burning sand, hear the screams through the radio static, see the smoke curling from the ridgeline. It wasn't supposed to happen. They were the best. But someone, somewhere, had fed their location to the enemy. The operation collapsed within minutes. And among the names marked KIA on the official report was Corporal Lena Carter, the team's youngest medic, 22 years old. Brilliant, brave, and stubborn as hell. He'd watched her save lives under fire. He remembered her laughter in the mess tent, her sarcasm when the men teased her about being the only woman in the squad. She wasn't supposed to die out there, but her body was never recovered. Walker ran a hand over his face, the weight of guilt pressing hard. For 12 years, he had blamed himself for that day, for the decision to push forward, for trusting faulty intel, for leading his team into a kill zone. He'd read Lena Carter's name 100 times in reports, memorized it, and carried it like a scar. And now, a woman with the same calm voice, same sharp eyes, and the same last name was serving under him, wearing a tattoo no one outside of that doomed task force should ever have seen. That night, Walker called in a favor. He had a friend in Washington, Major Alan Pierce, now working in Defense Intelligence. Walker sent a coded request through the secure line. Need background verification on Sergeant Emily Carter, stationed at Area Base 47. Discreet. Pierce responded an hour later, his voice tight. You're asking about someone under black clearance, James? Walker frowned. Black clearance? For a mechanic? Pierce hesitated. Her files sealed under a level 6 lock. That's higher than your command tier. You sure you want me digging into that? Walker's pulse quickened. I'm already in it, Alan. I just need to know if she's who I think she is. Pierce was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, Then you'd better be careful. Files like hers, they're sealed for a reason. The line went dead. Meanwhile, Emily Carter lay awake in her small barracks room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above her. Her muscles ached from another 14-hour day, but her mind wouldn't stop. She had seen it in his eyes, the moment the colonel recognized the tattoo. The shock, the memory, the suspicion. She'd been found out before, years ago, by people less perceptive. Each time she'd changed her name, moved bases, rewritten her history. The army was big enough to disappear in if he knew the right hands to shake and the right questions to avoid. But this time, it wasn't a stranger. It was him, a man who had led her unit, the man who had called the order that got her friends killed, and the man who had unknowingly signed the report declaring her dead. She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm inside her head. That day in Afghanistan still lived behind her eyelids, the gunfire, the sand in her mouth, the blood soaking through her uniform. She could still hear Torres's last words, the medic bag slipping from her hands, the explosion that tore through the valley. When she woke up hours later, buried under debris and smoke, the world was silent. No voices, no radio, no rescue. The army had abandoned them. She remembered crawling through that desert for 3 days, surviving on half a canteen of water before a passing supply convoy found her unconscious. The mission was classified, the survivors erased, the truth buried. Lena Carter had died that week. Emily Carter was born 2 months later, and she had promised herself that no one would ever connect the two. At dawn, Colonel Walker stood by the edge of the airfield, coffee steaming in his hand. The horizon was painted orange and gold, the air humming with the first sounds of engines starting up. He saw her walking toward the hangar, her pace steady, her posture unshaken. The more he watched her, the more the resemblance hit him sane stride, sane controlled focus. But it was the eyes that haunted him. Those were the eyes of a soldier who'd seen too much and learned to carry it quietly. "Sergeant Carter," he called out. Emily turned, stiffened slightly. "Sir, walk with me." She followed him along the line of parked aircraft, the morning sun glinting off the metal frames. "You've been quiet lately," he began. "I'm focused on my duties, sir. I can see that." He glanced sideways at her. "You remind me of someone I used to know." She didn't respond, but he noticed her hands tighten around her gloves. "Tell me something," he continued. "That tattoo you're hiding, what does it mean?" Her heart dropped, but her face didn't move. "Sir, the one on your wrist. I saw it the other day. It's not standard issue." She forced a calm tone. "It's personal, sir." He studied her, eyes narrowing. "That symbol isn't personal. It's military. Task Force Viper." For the first time, she broke eye contact. Walker stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Where did you get it?" Silence. The hangar hum seemed to fade around them. Finally, Emily looked up, her face unreadable. "You shouldn't ask questions you don't want answers to, sir." Walker froze, recognizing the edge in her tone, controlled, deliberate. The same voice he remembered from that mission's radio. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. She met his eyes, something dangerous flickering behind her calm. Someone who fixes things that should have stayed broken. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the sunlight, his mind spinning. That night, he pulled up the secure database again. He entered his command code, and another, higher one he'd memorized years ago from a forgotten mission file. The system hesitated, then unlocked. Subject: Emily Carter, access level. Restricted, Tier 6 status. Active. Duty: non-transferable origin. Classified: reinstated under Identity Protection Directive. There was one attached note, dated 10 years earlier. Operative retained for internal reassignment. Do not disclose prior service record under penalty of federal review. Walker stared at the words, his pulse hammering. She hadn't been demoted. She had been hidden. But why? What could have been so dangerous about a medic that the Army erased her name, changed her identity, and kept her buried among mechanics and maintenance crews? He leaned back in his chair, realization washing over him like ice. Maybe she wasn't hiding from the Army. Maybe the Army was hiding her. The next morning, Emily found a note tucked under her wrench on the workbench. It was folded twice, neat handwriting in black ink. "We need to talk. Hangar 9, midnight, -J.W. ***. She stared at it for a long time, her pulse quickening. For 12 years, she had run from this moment, from the man who unknowingly sent her unit to die. Now he wanted answers. And part of her, buried deep beneath layers of survival and anger, wanted to give them. But another part, the one that still remembered the explosion, the betrayal, the silence that followed, wanted to disappear before history repeated itself. Either way, she knew one thing. The secret was cracking open. And once the truth began to surface, there would be no way to bury it again. The airfield slept under a heavy blanket of silence. Midnight painted the base in silver, and shadow floodlights hummed in the distance. And the rhythmic clanking of chains, somewhere far away, echoed like a heartbeat. Hangar 9 stood at the edge of the compound, isolated and mostly abandoned, used only for temporary storage. Inside, the moonlight filtered through the cracked windows, spilling across the concrete floor. Colonel James Walker waited there, his back straight, his face hidden in the half-dark. He checked his watch again, 11:58 p.m. She would come. He knew she would. He had spent the entire day debating it. He'd rehearsed a dozen ways to start the conversation, to ease into the truth without cornering her. But the truth was, he didn't want diplomacy anymore. He wanted answers. And when he heard the distant sound of boots on concrete, he knew the answers were walking straight toward him. Emily Carter stepped through the open hangar door, her expression neutral, her eyes alert. She wasn't wearing her uniform jacket, just the dark gray undershirt and her dog tags glinting faintly under the light. "Sir," she said evenly, "thank you for coming." "I didn't have a choice," she replied, arms crossed. "You left a note." Walker gave a humorless smile. "You could have ignored it." "Could have," she agreed. "Didn't." For a moment, they stood there, two soldiers surrounded by ghosts, neither quite sure which version of the other they were facing. Walker took a step forward. "That tattoo," he began softly. "You said it was personal." "It's not, is it?" Emily didn't respond. "I know what it means," he continued. "Task Force Viper, Operation Black Echo, Wardak Province." Her jaw tightened, and that was all the confirmation he needed. Walker exhaled sharply. "You were there." She finally met his eyes. "You already knew that." "I needed to hear it," he said. "From you." Silence stretched between them. The hum of the floodlights filled the space, and the faint whir of night insects seeped through the hangar walls. Then Emily spoke quietly, almost bitterly. "I didn't think you'd remember me." He blinked. "Lena, don't call me that." Her voice cracked like a whip, sharp and instant. "That name's buried with the others." "You made sure of it." Walker flinched, the weight of guilt hitting him like a blow. "You think I wanted that mission to happen? You think I wanted to lose all of you?" "You didn't lose us," she snapped. "You left us." Walker's breath caught. "That's not true, isn't it?" Her tone was cold now. "You got the coordinates. You pushed forward even when comms went dark. And when we went missing, you didn't question the report. You just signed the damn papers." His throat tightened. "They told me everyone was gone. We searched for days. You searched for bodies," she interrupted. "Not survivors." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because she was right. After the ambush, he had been broken operating on command, on guilt, on numb procedure. He had trusted the report. He hadn't fought hard enough to find the truth. And now, standing in front of him, was the living proof of his failure. She turned away, pacing slowly, her boots echoing in the vast hangar. "I crawled 3 days through that desert, half dead, watching the vultures circle overhead. When that convoy found me, I wasn't Lena Carter anymore. I was nobody. That's when they came. They?" She looked back at him. "The men in suits. Intelligence Division, maybe CIA. They took me to a base outside Bagram. Said the mission was classified, that everyone had to believe I was dead. I was told to disappear, start over, take a new name. So I did." Walker stared at her. "They used you." "They protected me," she said quietly, though even she didn't sound convinced. "At least at first." He shook his head. "No, they buried you." "There's a difference." Emily let out a shaky breath. "Maybe, but I learned something while I was buried, Colonel." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Wardak wasn't an ambush. It was a setup. Someone leaked our coordinates from inside. Walker froze. "That's impossible." "Then explain how the Taliban knew exactly where we'd land. Explain how they had RPGs positioned on both ridges before we even dropped in." He felt the blood drain from his face. "You think it was someone in command?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." Walker's mind raced. The mission's details, the radio silence, the blocked intel he'd questioned them before, but the Pentagon had shut him down fast. "Who?" he whispered. Emily hesitated. "I don't have proof yet, but someone covered it up. And they're still covering it up. Why tell me now?" he asked. "Because you're the only one who was there and still has rank high enough to open the classified logs." He stared at her. "You're asking me to dig into an operation the government buried over a decade ago. You know what that means." "I do," she said steadily. "It means they'll come for both of us if they find out." The words hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. Walker walked to the corner table, grabbed a file folder, and slid it toward her. "I already started digging," he admitted. Inside were photocopies, data sheets, and an old mission roster. Your name wasn't the only one wiped. 2 others, Sergeant Torres and Lieutenant Heller, are missing from all archives. Her expression hardened. "They were alive when the blast hit." He nodded grimly. "Which means they might not be dead either." Emily's voice trembled slightly. "If that's true, then where are they?" He looked at her. "That's what we're going to find out." She met his gaze enemy. Ally, maybe both, and for the first time, something unspoken passed between them. Shared guilt, shared survival, shared danger. Outside, the night wind howled against the hangar doors, rattling the metal. Walker stepped closer to her. "We can't talk here again," he said. "If intelligence sealed your file, they're probably monitoring you. And maybe me now too." Emily nodded. "Then we go dark. You still know how." She gave a faint, humorless smile. "Once you've been erased, you never forget how to disappear." Walker felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. "Tomorrow, I'll access the archive at Command Central. I'll pull the original Viper deployment orders. You meet me at the perimeter trail outside Base 47 at 0200. "Understood." She started to leave, but he called out softly, "Lena." She stopped, turning halfway. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For everything. For believing you were gone." For a moment, her face softened. "I was gone, sir. The person you knew died out there." Then she walked into the shadows, the door creaking shut behind her. Walker stood there for a long time after she left. The hangar was silent again, but his heart wasn't. The past he'd tried to bury had come alive, and it had eyes and a voice and a mission. As he turned off the lights, a soft click echoed from behind the wall. He froze. A red dot blinked faintly on the corner of the ceiling, a hidden surveillance cam. Someone had been watching. He cursed under his breath, grabbed the file folder, and strode out into the cold night air. The wind whipped across the runway, carrying the faint, distant hum of an engine idling somewhere unseen. Inside a black SUV, parked near the far end of the base, a man in a dark suit lowered his binoculars. "Confirmed," he said into a comms mic. Walker made contact with Subject Alpha. A voice on the other end responded, calm and clipped. "Proceed with silent observation. If they dig further, initiate Phase 2. The man nodded, eyes fixed on the retreating figure of Colonel Walker, disappearing into the mist. "Understood," he said. "Operation Black Echo has just been reactivated." The digital lock clicked open with a soft tone that only sounded harmless. Inside the small data vault of Command Central, Colonel James Walker slipped in quietly, the door shutting behind him with a hiss of pressurized air. The room was sterile and humming, lined with gray metal cabinets and biometric terminals. It smelled faintly of ozone and secrets. He'd used an access code borrowed from a general's clearance level something he'd memorized years ago when he'd been trusted far more than he was now. It would give him 30 minutes before the system flagged an unauthorized entry. 30 minutes to dig through 12 years of silence. He sat down at the main console and typed the name that had haunted him for over a decade. Task Force Viper. Operation Black Echo, Warwick Province. The screen hesitated, flickered, then demanded a secondary clearance. Walker entered his old override key, his fingers trembling slightly. The system paused again, and then the first classified file opened. There were no reports of enemy ambushes, no recorded distress calls, no radio logs. The mission debriefs had been scrubbed clean. What remained was a short paragraph marked Official Summary. Task Force Viper encountered heavy resistance. All personnel presumed clear. Operation terminated. He scrolled down, but that was it. 3 sentences to explain an entire unit's annihilation. But then something caught his eye. A file buried under Subproject BE-12. It was marked with a red warning. Level 6. Clearance only. He clicked it anyway. The screen flickered, and a new document loaded its contents half-censored with black bars. But enough remained to send chills through his veins. ... Test subjects deployed to confirm enhanced reflex response under combat. Exposure. ... Viper operatives selected for biochemical compatibility. ... Subject LC demonstrated accelerated tissue recovery post-injury. Walker leaned forward, his blood running cold. Test subjects? He whispered. Then he saw 3 names listed before the blackout line. Carter, L. Primary candidate, Torres, M. Secondary candidate, Heller, J. Terminated post-incident. He stared at the words until they blurred. This wasn't a military unit. It had been an experiment. Outside, in the pre-dawn darkness near the perimeter trail, Emily Carter crouched beside a cluster of desert shrubs, watching the faint lights from the main building. Her hand rested on the small device, clipped to her belt a decrypted radio scanner. Every second of silence made her nerves hum. Walker had been inside the archive for nearly 25 minutes. She checked her watch again, then glanced at the horizon. The stars were fading into gray. The world was waking up, and time was running out. Then her earpiece crackled. Carter? His voice was low, urgent. I'm here. Meet me by the South Ridge now. We're not safe on base anymore. She tensed. What happened? I found the files, he said. And you were right. The mission wasn't an ambush. It was a trial run for a weapons program. Her pulse spiked. A weapons program? We weren't test subjects. Lena, he cut in sharply. You were. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. She froze in place, the desert wind tugging at her hair. Say that again. I'll explain everything face to face. Move now. They've probably flagged the system by now. She didn't argue. She started running. Walker exited the archive, just as the lights above him began flashing red. Unauthorized access detected. He slipped the flash drive into his jacket pocket, forced his breathing steady, and walked briskly toward the exit as alarms began to pulse in the distance. Guards shouted. Boots thundered down hallways, but he moved like a ghost straight through the confusion and out into the night. By the time the lockdown engaged, he was already beyond the compound fence, disappearing into the dust and wind. He met Emily by the ridge 10 minutes later. She was crouched low behind a cluster of boulders, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Talk, she said the moment he arrived. Walker handed her the flash drive. Everything we thought we knew about Warwick, it's all in here. She took it, frowning. What's on it? He exhaled. The mission wasn't a combat deployment. It was part of an experimental program, Project Black Echo. They were testing something called the resilience serum. It was supposed to enhance recovery, time and endurance under extreme conditions. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You mean biological modification? Exactly, he said grimly. and they used Viper as their field experiment. She shook her head in disbelief. That can't be right. We were soldiers, not lab rats. Walker's eyes softened. You were both. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she stared at the drive. That's why I survived the blast, she murmured. The burns healed faster than they should have. The doctors said I was lucky. Walker nodded. You weren't lucky, Lena. You were changed. The words hung heavy in the air. She looked up at him, her expression torn between anger and horror. Why didn't you know? You were our commanding officer. Because they kept me in the dark, too, he said. I was told we were testing new field medtech, not human enhancement. After the ambush, the higher-ups buried the program and everyone in it. Her voice cracked. And you signed the reports. He didn't defend himself. He just looked at her with the weary guilt of a man who'd spent years paying for his ignorance. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air, a gunshot. A bullet struck the rock beside them, spraying shards of stone. Down! Walker barked, grabbing her shoulder and pulling her behind cover. Through the faint moonlight, Emily saw a pair of figures moving along the ridge, black-clad, silent, tactical. No insignia. No lights. Security? She hissed. No, Walker said grimly, drawing his sidearm. Clean-up crew. They exchanged a look no need for words. Emily swung her rifle around, peering through the scope. 2 targets. Trained, one flanking, one advancing. On my mark, Walker whispered. 3. 2, now. Their shots cracked in unison. One hostile dropped instantly. The other ducked behind a dune, returning fire. Bullets screamed past, chipping rock and sand. Emily rolled to the side, sighted through her scope, and fired again. Silence. She exhaled slowly, adrenaline burning through her chest. They found us fast. They were watching before we met, Walker said. The hangar was bugged. Emily grimaced. Then this isn't over. Walker nodded grimly. It's just starting. As dawn broke over the desert horizon, they buried the 2 attackers under loose sand and scavenged their gear. Both carried encrypted radios marked only with an unfamiliar emblem, a black serpent coiled around a dagger. Walker stared at it. Same insignia as your tattoo. Emily frowned. No, not exactly. The daggers reversed. He felt a chill run through him. Then it's not Task Force Viper's symbol. No, she said slowly. It's the one that created us. They hiked through the rocky desert for hours, following an old trail toward a decommissioned Combs Outpost 1. Walker remembered from the early war years. When they reached it, Emily booted up a dusty terminal and inserted the flash drive. The old screen flickered, loading pages of redacted data. But deep in the layers of encrypted text, she found a string of coordinates. Walker, she said softly, this isn't just data. It's a location. He leaned over her shoulder. Where? She turned the screen toward him. Nevada. Restricted Sector 7. Facility name, Black Echo Research Division. Walker stared at the coordinates, realization dawning. They didn't just bury the program. They moved it. Emily's hands tightened around the keyboard. And maybe Torres and Heller are still there. Walker looked at her, his eyes steely. Then that's where we're going. She met his gaze haunted, determined, unbreakable. 12 years ago, they made us ghosts, she said. Now it's time to haunt them back. But outside, hidden in the shadows of a nearby ridge, the man in the dark suit watched through a long-range scope. He lowered his binoculars, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He spoke into his comms calmly, as the morning sun glinted off his earpiece. Targets are mobile. Heading west. Authorization to engage? A pause. Then a cold voice replied, negative. Let them run. The man smiled faintly. Why? Because they'll lead us straight to the others. He nodded once, eyes following the two distant figures trekking into the desert haze. Understood. Phase 2 begins. The desert stretched endless and merciless beneath a burning white sun. For 2 days, Walker and Emily had traveled west, following the coordinates burned into that flash drive. Their truck, stolen from a supply depot, rattled across cracked earth and forgotten highways where the road signs were bleached to ghosts. By the third morning, the GPS signal died completely. All that remained was the compass, the map, and the low growl of determination in Emily's chest. Sector 7 should be around 30 clicks from here, she said, squinting against the heat mirage. But I'm not seeing any perimeter fence or base markers. Walker nodded. If they moved Black Echo here, it won't be on any visible map. We'll be driving right past it without even knowing. He slowed the truck, scanning the horizon. Then he spotted a slight distortion ahead, a shimmer that didn't match the desert's rhythm. It looked like heat haze, but too geometric, too precise. That, he said quietly, is a cloaking field. Emily frowned. They can hide entire structures now? Walker gave a grim smile. They've been able to for years. That's why no one finds what they don't want found. He pressed down on the gas. The truck rolled forward, and the world flickered like a glitching video. Then suddenly, the desert opened up, and a sprawling underground entrance revealed itself beneath the illusion. Massive steel doors, half buried in sand, guarded by a collapsed watchtower and faded hazard signs. U.S. Defense Research Facility, restricted access. Black Echo Division. Emily's stomach twisted. We found it. Walker parked the truck behind a ridge, scanned for sensors, and pulled out a small EMP device. Short-range pulse, he explained. It'll fry their outer cameras for 10 minutes. That's all the window we've got. Then let's make it count. They slipped through the shadows, weapons drawn, the wind howling faintly through broken vents. The entrance panel was sealed with a digital lock. Emily crouched, pried it open, and exposed the circuitry. You sure you can do this? Walker whispered. I used to rebuild gunship control boards with half a toolkit, she muttered. I can handle a lock. A few tense seconds passed, then the keypad beeped softly, and the steel doors slid open with a deep hiss of air. The darkness beyond felt like stepping into another world. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. The air was sterile, humming with hidden machines. The narrow tunnel led them into a vast underground chamber rows of inactive terminals, medical pods, and broken glass panels scattered across the floor. Emily swept her flashlight across the walls. The paint was peeling, the signs faded, but one phrase still burned clearly above a cracked observation window. Project Black Echo, Human Resilience Program. Her chest tightened. This is where it happened. Walker walked slowly past the shattered pods, studying the remnants, 4 lines, broken data chips, sealed syringes still labeled with chemical codes. They abandoned it in a hurry, he said, but not before finishing their work. He stopped suddenly, his light catching on something that made his breath hitch. A row of metal nameplates, still bolted to a wall. He brushed the dust off one. Heller, J. Torres, M. Carter. Emily froze behind him. They had us on display. Not display, Walker said grimly. Inventory. Deeper inside, they found the central control room still intact. Emily powered the terminal, the screen flickering to life with faint green text. She accessed the archived files using the flash drive's decryption key. Lines of data poured across the screen. Research notes, biometric readings, surveillance footage. Then video feed number 021. Walker hesitated. Play it. The grainy footage loaded. A lab room came into view, white walls, bright lights. 3 soldiers strapped to gurneys. One of them, a young woman with blood-matted hair and defiance in her eyes. Emily. She stared at the screen, her face pale, her breath shallow. The woman in the video screamed as men in lab coats injected her arm with a clear fluid. Monitors spiked. Her pulse shot through the roof, then steadied unnaturally fast. One scientist muttered, "Regeneration response stable. Subject retains cognitive function." Then, as the feed continued, the door burst open, alarms blaring. A soldier entered, shouting for evacuation. The recording cut to static. Walker turned to Emily. "They experimented on you during the ambush." She was shaking now, gripping the desk until her knuckles went white. "They told me I was injured, that they were saving me." He reached out gently, but she pulled away. "I wasn't supposed to survive," she whispered. "I was supposed to prove it worked." Her voice cracked. "That serum, that's what kept me alive under the debris. That's why I heal so fast. They didn't rescue me, Walker. They were testing me." He swallowed hard, fury boiling in his chest. "Then we end this. We expose it all." Emily looked at him, her eyes hollow but fierce. "No one will believe us. Not without proof." He pointed to the screen. "Then we find proof they can't bury." They kept digging through the files until Emily stumbled upon one final entry time-stamped just a year ago. Project Black Echo. Status: reinstated. Phase 2. Current overseer: Dr. Adrian Shaw. Location: Nevada Sector 7. Primary facility operational active subjects. 2. Unidentified. Walker's heart sank. Phase 2. That means someone started it again. Emily stared at the list. 2 active subjects. Torres and Heller? Walker nodded slowly. Or worse. Before they could react, the power in the facility surged. Lights flickered on. A deep mechanical hum rolled through the floor. Emily's eyes widened. "Did you activate something?" Walker shook his head. "No." A speaker crackled above them, and a calm, cold voice filled the room. "Colonel Walker. Sergeant Carter. You've come a long way to find ghosts." They froze. But ghosts should stay buried. The voice was unmistakably human, but smooth, clinical. Walker glanced at the screen. The system interface had been taken over by an incoming transmission. The face of a man appeared older, with gray hair and cold blue eyes. "Dr. Adrian Shaw," Walker said quietly. The man smiled faintly. "I see my files weren't secure enough. You should have stayed out of this. You destroyed a unit and called it research," Walker growled. "You turned soldiers into lab rats." Shaw's smile didn't fade. "Progress requires sacrifice, Colonel. You of all people should understand that. The resilience program saved lives, yours included. You think that justifies murder?" Emily snapped. Shaw's gaze shifted to her, and for a moment, his expression almost softened. "Ah, Subject L. Carter, you're still functioning. Impressive." She stepped forward, trembling with fury. "You think I'm your experiment?" "I think," Shaw said calmly, "you're proof that my work succeeded." The screen glitched, then went black. An alarm began blaring through the compound. Walker grabbed Emily's arm. "We're compromised. Move." They sprinted through the corridors as metal doors slammed shut behind them. Steam hissed from the vents. Somewhere above, rotor blades thundered helicopters. Outside, black-clad operatives were descending into the desert. Emily and Walker reached the exit hatch, bursting out into the blinding sunlight. The sand whipped around them as they ducked behind rocks, bullets tearing the air. "Where now?" she shouted. Walker scanned the horizon. South toward the canyon. They ran, side by side, adrenaline surging, chased by the sound of engines and gunfire. Behind them, the facility rumbled as if waking from a long sleep, its systems rebooting, its secrets stirring once more. And as the helicopters rose higher, one of them bore a new insignia, an evolved version of the serpent and dagger crest. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a program reborn. That night, miles away and hidden in the ruins of an old mining camp, Emily sat by a small fire, her hands trembling as she cleaned the wound on her shoulder. Walker watched her quietly, his jaw tight. "It won't stop," he said finally. She looked up, her eyes reflecting the flames. "Then neither will we?" He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, we find Dr. Shaw." Her lips curled into a hard, weary smile. An end black echo for good. The night was unusually silent as Walker and Emily moved through the canyon, their footsteps muffled by loose gravel and the occasional snap of a twig. The desert moon painted their path in silver, illuminating sharp rocks and the skeletal remains of dead trees. "Do we know where he's hiding?" Emily whispered, her rifle at the ready. Walker shook his head. "No, but the coordinates from the Phase 2 files suggest a secondary facility underground. It's smaller than the Nevada lab, probably mobile. Shaw's clever. He wouldn't stay in one place long." Emily's jaw tightened. "And the two subjects?" Walker's gaze hardened. "Torres and Heller, or whatever they are now. Shaw has been using them to test new protocols. That's why he's moving them. He's probably monitoring them like live weapons." A chill ran down Emily's spine. For a moment, she pictured Torres and Heller strapped to tables, the same white-coated scientists probing, injecting, experimenting. Then, memories of her own time in the Nevada lab surface, the serum burning in her veins, the unnerving precision of Shaw's gaze. "We split up?" Emily asked. Walker shook his head. "No, we moved together. Silence, every sound matters." They navigated a narrow canyon path until the ground leveled, revealing an abandoned industrial area hidden behind cliffs. The place looked deserted, corrugated metal shacks rusting in the moonlight, a faint hum of generators somewhere underground. Emily motioned for Walker to crouch behind a pile of boulders. "Sensors?" He scanned with a handheld device. Multiple heat signatures. 3 in the facility. Possibly 4 if Shaw's present. Emily's eyes narrowed. 4? Then one of the subjects must be armed, or at least active. Walker exhaled, tension coiling in his shoulders. "Exactly. That's why we can't rush in. We need a plan." They crept closer, following a service path leading to a partially concealed hatch. Walker pried it open silently, revealing a steep ladder descending into darkness. As they descended, Emily noticed markings on the wall scratches, almost like claw marks. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. Walker frowned. Maybe Torres or Heller tried escaping. Or maybe Phase 2 evolved in ways we didn't anticipate. The air grew colder, sterile, the faint scent of chemicals and antiseptic making Emily's stomach churn. At the bottom of the ladder, a dimly lit corridor stretched ahead, lined with reinforced doors. Walker checked the first door panel. Cons hub. Minimal security. Cameras active. Emily pulled out a small EMP pulse device. "One shot," she said. "Lights out for 30 seconds. Walker nodded. She pressed it against the terminal. A soft whirring sound filled the room and then darkness. "Move," he whispered. They passed silently through the hub, entering a larger chamber. Rows of containment units lined the walls, some with cracked glass, others empty. Inside, 2 figures were visible, suspended midair by harnesses that restrained their movements. Emily's breath caught. Torres, Heller. Walker's eyes narrowed. Alive, but altered. Their bodies? Enhanced. The men hung still, their muscles taut, veins visible under pale, almost translucent skin. Their eyes flickered open as the room's backup lights hummed to life. They were alert, dangerously aware, but restrained. Emily's heart raced. They've been augmented. Like me? Walker nodded grimly. Basiram, the experiments. Phase 2 amplified everything. They're stronger, faster, and dangerous. The sound of footsteps echoed from a catwalk above. Shaw emerged, tall, imposing, his lab coat unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up. His eyes glinted with a cold intensity. "Ah," he said softly. "Colonel Walker, Sergeant Carter, and you found my most loyal subjects." Emily raised her rifle, aiming at Shaw. "Hands off. We're getting them out of here." Shaw chuckled. "You misunderstand. They are my experiment. They've been trained, conditioned. They're weapons now, controlled, loyal, in a way that you could never comprehend." Walker's teeth clenched. "Then why hide them underground? Why move in secrecy?" "Control, Colonel," Shaw said, pacing slowly. "The world isn't ready for what Phase 2 can do. I perfected it. I created soldiers who can endure anything, who can survive every battlefield, who can evolve. And yes," he turned to Emily, "you are part of that perfection." Emily's fingers tightened around the rifle. "We didn't volunteer for this." Shaw's smile was cold. "They didn't ask for you to survive, Sergeant. But you did. And now you can't go back." Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the two restrained subjects tensed violently, their bodies straining against the harnesses. Emily's eyes widened. Walker yelled, "Emily, get ready. They're going to break free." The glass panels shattered simultaneously. Torres and Heller landed with terrifying precision, muscles coiled like spring-loaded steel. Emily instinctively dove behind a metal console. Shaw laughed. "Phase 2 is self-aware now. My creations will follow their instincts: survival, combat, and loyalty. But they haven't learned morality yet. That's where you come in." Walker stepped forward. "Stay back." Torres and Heller lunged at the restraints, bending steel with ease. Walker fired his sidearm, but the bullets barely slowed them. Emily grabbed a security console, pulling the main power lever. The lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. The sounds of movement were all around them: heavy steps, metal clanging, guttural growls. Emily could feel the energy, the augmented strength of the two subjects as they fought against their bindings. Walker whispered urgently, "We need to separate them. Take Shaw first." Emily nodded, diving toward the catwalk where Shaw had retreated. He scrambled, but she was faster, striking him with a calculated blow. Shaw hit the floor, sprawling but conscious. Torres and Heller had finally freed themselves, but instead of attacking Walker and Emily, they froze, staring at Shaw, their expressions almost human in confusion. Emily realized something terrifying: the subjects retained cognition, but the augmentation amplified instincts unpredictably. They're aware," Emily whispered. "They're not just weapons. They remember who they are." Walker nodded. "Then we can't let Shaw control them anymore. If he survives, he'll keep using them." Emily ran to restrain Shaw while Walker approached Torres and Heller cautiously. "Listen to me," Walker said firmly. "We're not your enemies. Shaw is the danger. You trust me?" The two men hesitated, glancing at Shaw, then at Walker's steady eyes. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they nodded. Emily restrained Shaw, binding him with metal cuffs she found in a nearby supply crate. He laughed faintly. "You think you've won? Phase 2 is irreversible. You've only begun to understand what you're dealing with." Walker glared. "We'll take our chances." Outside, the desert sun had risen, casting long shadows across the canyon. Emily, Walker, Torres, and Heller moved quickly, staying low, making their way to the truck hidden a few miles back. Emily glanced at the two former subjects. They were stronger than normal humans, but they walked calmly, controlled, almost solemn. Walker exhaled. "We need to get proof. We can't just leave Shaw in custody without exposing Phase 2 to the world." Emily nodded. "Then Nevada isn't the end. Black Echo never sleeps, and neither will we." From the ridge above, a faint shimmer of helicopters approached. Emily's pulse spiked. "They're coming." Walker loaded his rifle. "Then we fight. They won't stop Phase 2, but we will make sure the world knows." Torres and Heller glanced at each other. No words, only understanding. Survival instincts honed by years of experimentation, and now aligned with the soldiers who had once been their commanding officer and comrade. Emily's eyes met Walker's. "Let's end this," she said. Walker nodded. "For the ones we lost, and the ones still alive." The desert echoed with the roar of engines, the hum of electricity, and the storm of vengeance finally set in motion. The Nevada desert blazed under the midday sun, casting long, jagged shadows across the canyon where the Black Echo facility hid. The hum of approaching helicopters had faded hours earlier, leaving a tense, blistering silence in their wake. Walker, Emily, Torres, and Heller crouched behind a ridge, surveying the compound from a distance. The reinforced steel doors they had entered days before now glinted under the sun, an ominous reminder of the horrors contained within. Shaw was restrained in the back of a rugged SUV, but Walker knew better than to believe him truly powerless. "They won't just stay put," Emily said, her rifle at the ready. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the adrenaline that surged beneath her calm exterior. "They've protected this facility for years. Phase 2 isn't going to let us walk away." Walker nodded. "We have the proof now. The files, the videos, everything. If we can broadcast it before they respond, the program dies with exposure." Torres and Heller, augmented beyond human limits, flanked them, silent sentinels. Emily glanced at them and saw not just weapons, but something deeply human beneath the enhancements. A spark of the soldiers they once were. They moved swiftly, using the canyon's natural cover to approach a secondary entrance to the facility. The EMP device Emily carried would disable external sensors for exactly 20 seconds, enough for them to infiltrate the communications hub. Walker whispered, "On my mark." The pulse hit, and the security lights flickered and died. Torres and Heller moved like shadows, dismantling the remaining perimeter alarms with precision. Emily and Walker sprinted to the main console, connecting the flash drive. The system roared to life despite the EMP, displaying dozens of live feeds from underground labs, holding cells, and operating theaters. Files scrolled across the screen. Human test subjects, chemical compounds, surgical augmentation logs, and encrypted communications. Emily's fingers flew over the keyboard, breaking through layers of encryption until the broadcast command was available. "We can send everything to every secure media outlet in the country. No one can hide this," she said. Walker exhaled slowly. "Do it. Let the world see what Black Echo really is." Before the broadcast could start, alarms screamed, flooding the facility with red lights. Steel shutters slammed down, locking exits, and the hum of augmented combatants echoed in the hallways. Phase 2 soldiers fully active, enhanced subjects were moving toward the hub. Emily's heart pounded. "They're here." Torres and Heller tensed. Walker gritted his teeth. "Then we fight smart. Use them against Shaw's defenses." The first wave of enhanced soldiers reached the room, their movements unnatural, predatory. Torres and Heller engaged them, their reflexes faster than human sight could follow. Steel and bone collided as they neutralized each intruder with terrifying efficiency. Walker and Emily ducked behind consoles, firing when necessary, while Emily simultaneously uploaded the files to multiple news networks. The seconds stretched like hours, each one filled with the whine of bullets, the crunch of combat boots, and the low growl of modified humans. Shaw, restrained in the SUV, laughed faintly, unafraid. "You can't stop evolution," he called over the chaos. "They are perfect. You'll never control them," Walker glared. "We don't need to control them. They need freedom. And so do you." He sprinted to the SUV, rifle trained on Shaw. Emily reached his side, keeping the door ajar, ready to prevent escape. The augmented soldiers in the facility paused, sensing Shaw's influence. But Torres and Heller stepped forward, commanding without words. Their enhanced instincts allowed them to override Shaw's subtle conditioning. Shaw's eyes widened in shock. "No, they're mine," he shouted. "Not anymore," Emily said, stepping closer. "We decide now." The broadcast completed. Screens outside the facility, in nearby towns, and on encrypted government networks flickered with images of Phase 2. Augmented soldiers, the hidden labs, and Shaw himself. The world now knew. Sirens wailed in the distance as federal authorities responded. But inside, Walker, Emily, Torres, and Heller still had to secure Shaw. The man struggled, using his intellect and agility to try to escape. Emily lunged, catching his wrist, twisting it into the restraint mechanism she had scavenged from the lab. Walker moved to secure him further, and Torres and Heller flanked the perimeter. "You think exposing me stops the program?" Shaw sneered. "Phase 2 isn't just a project. It's a philosophy. Someone else will continue where I left off." Walker's voice was cold. "Then we make sure that someone never sees the light of day. You die in custody, Shaw. That's the only way." Emily stepped back, and with a single decisive motion, they secured the final restraints. Shaw's rage filled the room, but he was powerless now. With Shaw contained, the augmented soldiers, Torres and Heller, stood silently. Emily approached them. "You're free now. You don't have to be weapons anymore." Torres's voice was low, almost human. "We've only ever known survival, Sergeant." Heller nodded. "But maybe. Now we can choose something else." Emily smiled faintly, her gaze falling on Walker. "We're finally ending the nightmare." Walker exhaled, the weight of years of guilt and secrecy lifting slightly. For everyone lost and everyone left behind. Authorities arrived minutes later, alerted by the broadcast. Shaw was taken into custody under heavy security. The facility was sealed, the remaining Phase 2 subjects evaluated by ethical oversight committees and medical teams. Emily, Walker, Torres, and Heller watched from a distance as the helicopters lifted Shaw away, the desert wind carrying the echoes of the past. Walker put a hand on Emily's shoulder. "You were supposed to be dead." She shook her head. "No, I survived. I was supposed to finish it. And now we have." Walker nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon, where the sun touched the desert with gold. "It's over. But the scars won't heal overnight." Emily looked at Torres and Heller, seeing the remnants of who they were and who they might become. "We rebuild. That's the next mission." Torres smiled faintly, a human expression in a body enhanced for war. "We'll do it differently this time." Heller's eyes reflected quiet determination. No more secrets. The wind carried sand over the facility, hiding it beneath nature once again. But the world knew the truth now. Black Echo could no longer operate in the shadows. Days later, in a debriefing room with federal investigators, Emily recounted every detail. Walker stood beside her, silent but vigilant. Torres and Heller gave statements of their experiences, ensuring the program's full exposure. When it was done, Emily stepped outside into the Nevada desert. The sun warmed her face. The air tasted sweet after years of secrecy, fire, and blood. She lifted her sleeve slightly, revealing the winged dagger tattoo. Walker walked up beside her. "The world sees it now," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Yes, and no one can bury it ever again." Walker nodded. "You're no longer a ghost, Emily. You're proof." She looked toward the horizon, where the mountains met the sky. Proof that even in the darkest missions, some light survives. And some people fight to make sure the shadows are exposed. Walker placed a hand on her shoulder. "The fight isn't over, but the nightmare is." Together, they turned toward the setting sun, the desert stretching endlessly before them, a reminder that the past was behind, the present was hard-earned, and the future was theirs to shape. For the first time in 12 years, Emily felt free. The wings of her tattoo weren't just ink. They were a symbol of survival, vengeance, and hope. And with Walker, Torres, and Heller beside her, the world knew that Black Echo could never rise again. The shadows had been exposed. The experiment was over. And the soldiers who survived would never be silent again.